one we will use in this particular course. So we are going to use the Docker Community Edition in this particular course. So there is a lot of benefits and lot of drawbacks as well to use the Community Edition. So first we will talk about the benefits of the Community Edition. So Docker Community Edition comes with a very frequent releases which have the features which is not available in the Docker Enterprise Edition, because Enterprise Edition supports the stable builds of the Docker, which is not the applicable with the Community Editions. Community Editions may have some kind of builds which is still in the testing and which is not stable. So with the Community Edition, we will get the latest feature available in the Docker. The only drawback with the Community Edition is Community Edition have the limited access, and if you will get any issue, so that you will not found any enterprise support for the Community Editions. So we have discussed about the CE, which is for the Community Edition, and EE, which is for the Enterprise Edition. Now we will talk about the stable and edge releases. So basically Docker have two kind of releases, the edge release and stable release. As we have already discussed, that Docker Community Edition have the latest updates. So Docker Community Edition always comes in two flavor, the edge release and the stable release. Edge release of the Community Edition comes with the latest technologies, with the latest changes in the Docker images, which is not tested. But on the same side, Community Editions comes with the stable release as well. A stable release of the Docker Community Editions release in every quarter, instead of edge release of the Docker Community Edition release every month. So we will see the Docker editions are available on the website store.docker.com. So you can see the docker.store.com is open. So right now we can see over here we are getting two options, Docker EE and Docker CE. So first let's click on the Docker EE, right? So over here we are getting 10 available editions of the Docker EE, which is Docker Enterprise Edition for Oracle Linux, Docker Enterprise Edition for Ubuntu, Docker Enterprise Edition for Azure, Docker Enterprise Edition for CentOS, for IBM Power, for IBM Z, for IBM for AWS, and for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? And there is one more, Docker Windows Server 2016. So these are Docker EE editions. Once we will go with the Docker CE, or if you want you can click on any edition, like we clicked on the very first. So start first month trial, and after then buy subscription. So this is the paid tool, right? We will go back and we will click on Docker CE, which is Community Edition, and there is 8 options available for the Docker Community Edition. Which one is for Mac, for AWS, for Fedora, for CentOS, for Windows, for Microsoft Cloud, Azure, and for Ubuntu, and another edition for Debian-based Linux systems. So these are the community editions which are available for the Docker free of cost. So we are going to discuss and we are going to use about the community edition version of the Docker. There are three major types of install of the Docker. The first one is Linux. We have seen there was different Docker editions was available for the different flavor of the Linux. The second is Mac and Windows, and third is cloud. So we will talk about these. So Docker for Mac and Windows comes with a default toolbox. There is not a single image which will be installed on your Mac machine or on your Windows machine. So when we are installing the Docker on Mac machine or on Windows machine, then we have to install a set of tools, right? Which will be called Docker Toolset. And Docker Toolset is a combination of different tools. Why this kind of toolset is required? This kind of toolset is required because Mac and Windows natively doesn't support Docker, right? So when we are installing the Docker toolset on our Mac machines and on our Windows machines, so behind the scene, or you can say in the background, Docker toolsets are creating very small Linux virtual machines to create and start your Docker containers. Although on the UI, you will not realize that internally the processing is being executed on the Linux VMs, right? The second one is the Linux. So Docker comes with different kind of flavors for different kind of Linux versions, and Linux natively support the Docker. So you don't need to you don't need to install the complete tool set of the Docker. You can directly download the Docker and install on your Linux machine. The third type of the installation is the cloud. So we have seen the Docker is available for different cloud machines like AWS, Microsoft Cloud, and Google Cloud. So when Docker comes with the AWS, then there is a different kind of features which is available in the Docker for the AWS, like AWS EC2 support and AWS IAM support. There is a different kind of supports Docker is providing to the AWS. In the similar way, on the other clouds like Microsoft Cloud and Google Cloud, Docker is also supported different kind of features. So this is all about the Docker CE and Docker EE. Now let's talk about the stable and edge releases. So very first, the Docker CE, we have already discussed the Docker CE is a free version and Docker Enterprise Edition is a paid version. Enterprise Edition comes with the support, which is the enterprise support and some stable release features, right? Edge release is an unstable release of the Docker and it's released quarterly. On the other hand, a stable release is a stable release of the Docker, which is basically available with the enterprise editions. So all enterprise editions of the Docker is basically specific to a specific version of the OS or a specific cloud, and they have the native supports and native configurations, right? And they also have the technical team support of the Docker INC. So this is all about the Docker CE, EE, stable and release versions. In the coming lectures, we will see how we can install the Docker on different kind of operating systems. So I would like to thank you guys. We will see you in the next lecture. Two types, the Linux containers and the Windows containers, right? So late in 2016, Windows releases and announced the Windows native containers. So right now we have two containers available with the Docker editions. First is the Linux container, which is the native with the Docker, and second is Windows container. Windows container can be used only with the Windows machines, but vice versa, Linux container can be used with the Windows machine and with the Linux machine as well. And on the Mac as well, we will learn the Linux containers. Linux containers are still the default containers because Linux containers were released with the Docker primary editions, which was earlier, I think in 2012, right? So when the Docker first released their official release in the market, then the container was the Linux container. And don't confuse with the terms the container and Docker. We will learn about the complete container concepts in this particular course. Right now, we just need to know container is something or it's something like a process which will be executing inside the Docker or Docker which execute the containers, right? So container has two types, the Linux, which is default, and the Windows. In this course, we will learn about the Linux containers. So in this particular course, we are not going to cover up the Windows containers. We are not going to execute the Docker on the Windows machine. We will execute the Docker on the Linux machine, and we will see how Linux machines can handle, use, deploy, and create the Linux containers. So in this particular course, when I'm saying or when I'm talking about the containers, then by default, I'm talking about the Linux containers. Now we will talk about the Windows Docker versions. So Windows have two kind of Dockers, right? So Windows native Docker is associated with the Windows 10 Pro and Enterprise Edition only. If you are using Windows 10 home base operating system, then native Windows Docker will not execute on your Windows machine. So if you want to execute the Windows Docker version on your Windows machine, then it is mandatory that you would have Windows 10 Pro or Enterprise Edition available on your desktop or laptop. But if you are using some older version of the Windows, like you are using Windows 8, you are using Windows 7, Windows 8.1, Vista, or you are using Windows 10 home base versions, right? Then there is a different kind of Docker which is available for your machine, which is called Docker Toolbox. So Docker Toolbox is a complete toolbox of the Docker set which have the Docker machine to execute the Docker. We will learn about the differences between the Windows Dockers and Docker toolbox in the coming slides. Right now, we just need to know if you want to execute and you want to install the native Docker for the Windows, then Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise Edition is required on your machine. If you don't have Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise Edition, then you can install the Docker toolbox on your machine to execute the Docker on your Windows machine. Windows Server 2016 also supports the Windows containers. So Windows Server 2016 is a server-side technology of the Windows. So fortunately, we have the Docker native installation available for the Windows Server 2016. If you are using Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows Server 2001, then Docker native release is not available with this particular Windows Server. But if you are using Windows Server 2016, then Docker native release is available with the Windows 2016. You can use it, install it, and that will be capable to run Windows containers on your machine. So we will learn how we can install the Docker or Windows 10 Pro or Enterprise Edition. So for this, we need to go to the link https store.docker.com. So let's see how we will go to this link and what we will find out over this link. So you can see we are on store.docker.com. And as we have seen or discussed in the earlier lectures, we have two kind of versions available of the Docker, which is Docker Enterprise Edition and Docker Community Edition. So we will go to the Community Editions. And over here, I have 8 release available for the Community Edition. As we need to find out the Windows one, so we will choose the operating system Windows. And over here, I have Docker Community Edition for the Windows, right? I will click this particular link. So now we can see Docker Community Edition for the Windows by Docker, which is supported Windows and operating time system is 64. All the information which is required is being mentioned over here, right? So Docker C for Windows is a Docker designed to run on Windows 10. It is a native Windows application that provides easy to use development environment for building, shipping, and running Dockerized apps. So to install it, you just need to double click the Docker for Windows installer, right? When installation finishes, Docker starts automatically. So we will see from where we will find out that particular link, right? So to download the Docker edition, you need to log into the store.docker.com. So let's see what we will get. So I'm going to log into this particular website. So you can see I have logged in on the store.docker.com. Over here, I'm getting my username, and over here, I'm getting a link to download the Docker. You just need to click this link, and this will basically download the Docker installer on your Windows machine. After that, you need to, and this will be a exe file, so you need to double click to execute this particular exe file. Right now, I don't have Windows 10 Pro or Enterprise Edition available on my laptop, so I can't show you the practical demo, but I can explain how you can basically get this. You just go to this, get Docker, and you can see a downloading is being started, and it's an exe version, right? So the total size is 516 MB. So I'm going to stop it, right? And over here, if you want You want to choose some kind of builds, then you can choose. Over here I'm getting two builds, the Docker CE for Windows stable release and Docker CE for Windows edge release. We have already discussed the stable and about the edge release in the previous lectures. So once the complete download will done, you need to double click that particular exe file to install the Docker and follow the instructions. When it will complete the installation, it will ask you to reboot your machine. You need to reboot your machine, and after that you will get this particular kind of icon in your icons on your Windows, right, which you can open from the left bottom side of your Windows machine. If you want to verify the Windows on your machine, then you can open the PowerShell and execute the command Docker version. It will return you the installed Docker version on your machine, and you will get an icon like this on your toolbox on Windows, right? So this is the way how we can install the native Docker on the Windows 10, right? Now suppose we want to install the Docker toolbox. And when we need to install the Docker toolbox, if we are using a Windows which is not a Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise Edition, so how we can basically install the Docker toolbox. So let's see how we can install the Docker toolbox. Docker again, and I will go to the Docker store. I will go to the Docker Community Edition, and I will choose the Windows in operating system. This is the same link which we have clicked in the last. I will click the same. And over here, if you see, you are getting information. Requires Microsoft Windows 10 Professional or Enterprise Edition 64. For the previous versions, get Docker Toolbox. This is the link. You need to click this link. And over here, we are getting a complete instruction of the Docker Toolbox. So we need to go to scroll down the page and click this particular link, Get Docker Toolbox for Windows. Once you will click this particular link, it will download an executable file on your machine. To install the Docker, you need to click that particular executable file and it will install the Docker on your Windows a machine which is prior to Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise Edition. If you have Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise Edition available on your machine, you directly download the Docker as we have discussed previously in the same lecture, right? Now suppose you want to install Docker Server 2016, right? Or you want to install the Docker, native Docker on your Windows Server 2016. So how can we do that? So we need to go to the Docker store, right? And over here, there's a limitation. We need to go to the Docker Enterprise Editions because Docker native Docker is not available in the Community Edition for the Windows Server 2016. So I need to go to the Docker Enterprise Edition. Just click this link, choose the operating system Windows, and you will get the link Docker Enterprise Edition for Windows Server 2016. You simply click this particular link, and to download the Docker for the Docker Enterprise Edition or for the Windows Server 2016, you need to click this link, Get Docker, or over here we can see we are not getting the stable or edge releases. Why we are not getting the stable or edge releases? Because we are in the Docker Enterprise Edition, and Enterprise Edition always have the stable release of the Docker. Once the complete file will download, you are getting the complete instruction over here to install the Docker on your machines. So after that, you need to open the PowerShell and you need to execute the command install module, Docker provider force, install package, Docker provider, Docker provider name, and Docker provider force. After that, you can see how the Docker is being installed on your machine or not, right? By simply this command. So this is the way how we can install the Docker on Windows machines and on Windows servers. We have not covered the complete practical of this particular lecture because this particular course is all about to execute the Docker on the Linux machine. So we didn't executed the Docker installation on the Windows. There's a one more thing. If you're using any kind of virtual machine setup on your Windows machine, then you would not be able to install the Docker on your Windows machine. So to do that, we need to uninstall the virtual machine setup on your machine and format your machine to install the Docker, because inside your Windows, Docker will execute Hyper-V, which is not uh, compatible with the virtual machines, right? So if you are already running some kind of virtual machine on your on your Windows machine, then you can't install the Docker on Windows. So there are some similar kind of or a set of limitations with the Docker for Windows. So we are going to choose that Linux for this particular course. So thank you guys. We will see you in the next lecture. That doesn't mean that native Docker will support on your operating system. Native Docker will only support on your operating system if you're using minimum Mac version 10.10.4 or higher version of the Mac. Now we will see how can we install the Docker on Mac machine. For this, we need to go to the website www.store.docker.com. We have visited in the last lecture when we are trying to install the Docker on Windows machine. So let's go to the www.store.docker.com. So you can see we are on store.docker.com, and in this particular course we are going with the Docker Community Editions. So we will click the Docker Community Edition link. It will open the available Docker Community Edition versions. The very first link we are getting for the Docker Community Edition for the Mac. We will click this particular link, and over here it is asking me to log in to my Docker account. If you don't have any account, then you need to sign up and then create your account. But I have my account, so I will directly log in to my account. So you can see I have logged in my account. So my name is being displayed over here. And once I will click the link, it will show me some option, my profile, my content, billing, and logout link. I close this, and over here I am getting a link to get Docker. I will simply click this link to download the Docker setup on my Mac machine. So once I will click it, you will get a simple downloading DMG image over here. It will take some time to download the Docker setup on my machine. But if you are using the Mac machine which is earlier to use Yosemite 10.10.3, then you need to click this particular link, Docker Toolbox. This will render you on some other page where you will get a link to download the Docker Toolbox for the Mac. So over here we are getting a link, get Docker Toolbox for the Mac. You need to click this link to download the Docker Toolbox setup on your Mac machine, and over here we are getting the install link to install instruction. I will click this link, and over here we are getting the complete install instruction to install the Docker Toolbox on your Mac machine. As my Mac machine is 10.13.4, which is earlier to 10.10.3, which is latest to 10.10.4, so I can directly run the Docker on my machine, right? So that I downloaded the Docker image directly on my machine from this particular link. We are fast forwarding this video so that until the downloading will finish. The download process is done, and we can see we have a docker.dmg file which have the size 523.1 MB, right? So to install this particular Docker setup on a Mac machine, we need to click this. It will open the pop-up like this, opening the docker.dmg. It will verify the prerequisite as per the installation process and open a pop-up like this, which is a normal installation process in the Mac machines. We need to drop this particular Docker into applications, right, which is done. Now I will open the applications. and over here I'm getting a Docker icon which is still being processed. I will double click this icon. So it is saying welcome to the Docker for Mac. We are warmly happy to have you. Click on next, click on OK. It will ask you for your root user password. I will provide my password. Click OK and a setup should be running. Right? We can see a Docker icon is being presented over here and we are getting Docker is starting. Right? A Docker icon will be present on your menu bar like this. Once you will click it, it will say you Docker is starting. So we have to wait until this particular yellow button will be green. Now you can see this is green and it is saying Docker is running, right? Now we will click this link about the Docker to get the information. And it is saying version 18.06.1 CE Mac 73. This is the version which is running on your machine, right? I'll simply close it and go to my browser. Right? So we have downloaded the Docker Community Edition for the Mac. Now we need to learn how we can amend some preferences or setting on my machine. After that, we will see a code editor to edit some code files on your Mac machine. So basically why we need the code editor to edit the code files on my Mac machine. This is because in the coming lectures we are going to learn how we can deploy and implement the Docker files and the native codes to execute the Docker. For that we need some kind of editor. So we will download and install some code editor which work fine with the Docker. To edit the preferences, I will go to my Docker icon and click it. And over here, I am getting a link preferences. I simply click this particular link. It will open the Docker preferences. Over here, I am getting the general preferences like start Docker when you log in. If you check out this code, this particular link, then it will not start the Docker when you will log in. But if you will keep this checked, then every time you will log in on your Mac machine, the Docker will start automatically. The second is about automatically check for the updates. It will automatically check for the updates of the Docker Community Edition and remind you whenever it will have the new update for you. Third one is about include VM in time machine backups. We are not going to include any VM in the time machine backups, so by default this will be unchecked. Fourth is securely store Docker logins on Mac OS Keychain, right? So it will basically use your root user credential to log in on the Docker. Send users notification. So whenever you will get the timely notification of the uses of your resources which Docker will use on your machine. Second one is about the file sharing. These kind of options you will get. In the coming lectures we will learn about some kind of bind mounting or volume binding, right? So we will learn about these things over there. This is about the disk. So it means 2.4 GB disk it will use on your machine. It doesn't mean that it will simply use the 2.4 GB on your machine. It means at max Docker can use this much of machine on your disk. Once we will go to advance, it is saying Docker will use 2 CPUs and 2 GB RAM, and it will use 1 GB as a swap memory. What does it mean? If you want, you have the more resources on your machine, you can increase it up to any extent. Like I can increase it up to 4, and to apply the changes, you simply need to click apply and restart changes. When I'm setting it from 2 to 4 GB, it doesn't mean that Docker will consume this memory or Docker will preserve this memory on your machine. It means at max, Docker can use 4 GB RAM of your machine. But if some other process requires this particular memory to execute on your machine, then Docker will provide that memory to that particular process as well. By default, we will keep it 2. right? And second one is proxy. We will learn about these things in the coming lectures. Third is daemon threads, and for the Kubernetes. So we will learn about these things in the coming tutorials. This is the setup how Docker can be run on your Mac machine. If you want, you can open the terminal. Right over here, it is my terminal, and by the command docker version, you can verify the Docker version on your machine. Once I will click the Docker version, it is returning me client version 18.06.1 CE Community Edition, API version 31.38, Go version, git commit is this, build is this, and many more details. So by this command, it confirms like Docker is running on my machine. Suppose if I will stop my Docker, it is say restart Docker. So it will take some time to restart, and in between I will execute the command Docker version, right? So it is not returning you the server details. See, it is just returning you the client details. So it means Docker is running server client model on my Mac machine. Because Mac OS doesn't support Docker natively, so that Docker is running in the client server model on my Mac machine. When it is saying the server, and that means Docker basically is creating a very tiny Linux VM on machine to execute the processes, which is Docker is calling the server, right? So you can say again Docker is up and running. If I will again execute the command Docker version, it will return you the client and server ID. See, and it is in the server, it is clearly saying the OS type is Linux AMD 64, right? And it is defining the time as well. So basically Docker on the machine, on the Mac machine, is running in client and server architecture, where the client is the Docker Mac machine and server is Docker basically internally running a Linux VM on your machine to execute the container processes. Now we will learn about next part, which is Docker or some code editor. So I'm going to use the code editor Visual Studio. You need to type Visual Studio on your Google, click out the first link, and it will ask you to download. So over here I'm getting download for the Mac. So I'm going to download Community Edition. No thanks. Right over here I'm getting a link, View Visual Studio. I click this link, and over here I'm getting a link, download. I will click this link, and it will land you on a page, code editing redefine code.visualstudio.com. I will click this link. It will start download process on your machine. See, 73.3 MB code MB file will be downloaded on your machine. So we have to wait until the download process will complete. So we can see a 77 MB zip file is downloaded. We need to unzip it. Right? Once you will double click it, it will expand the zip file. Right? And we are getting the executable file over here. I need to double click this file. And Visual Code setup will start. See, I need to open it, as I didn't download it from the Mac applications. Simply close it. Once you will open that, a Visual Studio will open on your machine. See, this is the UI of the Visual Studio. Right? So this is just a code editor, right, which we can use to edit a code of different scripting, right? So if you are a Python guy, you can simply write Python code over here. If you are a Groovy guy, then simply you can write down the Groovy code here. You can write down the Java code here, C Sharp, VBNet, any code can be done over here, right? So Visual Studio provide a very good support for the Linux, for the Docker native commands, so that I downloaded it. If you will go on the extensions over here, so over here you are getting a different kind of extension which you can install on your machine. So suppose if you want to install the Python extension, you simply click this particular link and it will install the Python extension on your machine. So right now totally 1608445 download was done of this particular extension. So we are getting the Python extension is being downloaded. So on the same way, we can download the Docker extension as well, which will help us to run some Docker files on our local machines, right? So over here I will type Docker and I will get a Docker extensions. So this is the start one. I will simply click it and it has many more installation. The later one have some lower installation. So I will click the first one and install it. Right? So it will take a few seconds to install the complete Docker extension on your machine. So this is downloading the different kind of extension. And you can see the both extension are being enabled, right? If you want to disable them, you disable them by this link. If you want to uninstall them, you can uninstall the extension anytime, right? So if over here you will create a new file, like, and you name it some kind of file which is like Docker file, you name it something like Docker file. See, I name it Docker file. Save as Docker file. So I'll get a Docker icon over here, right? It is basically by default accepting it as a Docker file. So I can write down the Docker native codes over here, which we will learn in the few coming lectures in the same course, right? So this is the way how basically you can install different kind of editors for your Docker. So we have seen so many things in this particular course. We have seen how can we basically download what kind of versions is available for the Mac OS, how can we install the Docker on the Mac OS, how can we change the preferences, and how we can download and configure the native code editor tools for the Docker. This is all about this particular lecture. In the coming lecture, we will learn how we can set up a cloud machine to execute the Docker on the cloud machines. Thank you guys. We will see you in the next lecture. Your account, right? Else you can log in directly on your account by click on this particular login button. I have my account on the DigitalOcean, so I'm going to log in on my account. Once you will log in successfully, you will land on your dashboard. Right now you can see I have already running a cloud machine Jenkins server. The IP of this is 142.93.188.95. Now we will see how can we create a new cloud machine over the DigitalOcean. But before this, we will try to explore some dashboard of the DigitalOcean. So over here, you can create or you can get your project information, your profile information. By this particular link, you can create a new project on the DigitalOcean. By the droplets, you can create a new cloud machine. Over here, you can get the spaces which you are using. It is taking some time. Over here in the accounts, you have your billing section. By click on the billing section, you can get your billings details. Right now, I have my credit just $5 and I've used some of my credit. I can add my amount over here with the help of the credit card or PayPal account. Over here, I'm getting some kind of securities, right? So let's see how we can create a new cloud machine on the DigitalOcean. So I will go to the droplets. Go to create and create a droplet. I'm not going to display or discuss any volumes, DNS, cloud firewalls, floating IPs, any load balancer or alert policies. I just create a new droplet. Once you will click this link, it will ask you to choose the type of distribution which you want to use, the Ubuntu, FreeBSD, Fedora, Debian or CentOS. I'm going to use Ubuntu, and over from this particular drop-down you can choose the specific version which you want to install. I'm going by the default 16.0.4.64-bit operating system. Over here, you are getting a very nice UI. It is saying the memory is 1 GB, CPU is 1 CPU, and SSD disk is 25 GB, transferable is 1 terabyte, and it will cost you close to $5 per month. The second option is about 2 GB machine. This is the RAM. 1 CPU, 50 GB SSD, 2 terabyte transfer. It is going to cost you around $10 per month. The third one is 3 GB and so on, 2 GB and so on, right? So these are the basic configuration machines which is basically you can create on your cloud machine. So as we are going to run our Docker on these machines, so I will choose at least 2 core CPU machine. So I'm going to choose this particular option where I have 2 GB as a RAM, 2 core CPU, 60 GB SSD and 3 terabyte as a machine. It will cost me around $15 per month. If you want to use, you can choose any one, right? Just after this, I will go to Blue and I will choose my data center, right? So you can choose your data center in any available region. By default, I'm going to choose the data center in New York. I don't want any additional services like private networking, no. User data monitoring, no. I don't need anything. I don't need new SSH key for this particular machine. Yes, over here, you can rename your machine. So suppose I name it Docker machine. Space is not allowed. So you can choose underscore. Underscore is also not allowed. Okay. I'm going to choose Docker machine. Right? If you want to add tag, you can tag it over here. If you don't want to use, just click on create. Once you will click on the create, it will take very few seconds to set up a machine for you. So right now, I'm not getting any error. So it has started and based context deadline exceeded. Okay. So there is some kind of error I'm getting over here. So I will go to my droplets and I can see it didn't started the machine, right? I will choose the same configuration again. Maybe there was some kind of error related to the billing details or something like that. So you can see a new machine is being set up for me. Once this blue bar will complete, it means the machine is being done, right? The setup is being done and you are ready, machine is ready to use. So let's wait until this will complete and it will take very few seconds. Once this will complete, you are getting a green icon over here. The machine name is this and you are getting the public IP over here, right? We can use this IP to access or SSH this machine. But now the question comes in our mind, how can we SSH these machines? If you are a Windows user, then to SSH the Linux machine, you need to install some kind of tools. You can choose any one of your favorite or you can choose some famous tools like Putty or Mobac Stream. If you are Linux or Mac OS users, you can SSH this machine from your terminal. So we need to open the terminal and we can access this particular machine. To SSH the machine, we need the IP of the machine. You simply hover over here, click on this particular copy link, it will copy the IP for you. Now you need to open the terminal, right? And you can enter the command like SSH space username @ IP, right? But we don't know the username of this particular machine. So how can we find out the username and password of this particular machine? So if you have account associated with your email ID, you have signed up with your email ID, then you will get the machine details on your mail. So I need to open my mail. You need to open your email which is associated with your DigitalOcean account. So my Gmail account is basically associated with the DigitalOcean account. So I need to open my Gmail. Inside your mail, you will get an email from the DigitalOcean with the subject your new droplet your droplet name. As my droplet name is Docker, so it is as the subject your new droplet Docker. Over here, I am getting the IP of my machine, the username and the password. I simply copy the password to access my machine. Go to my terminal, right, and change the username with the root. As we can see, the username of this machine is root. Password is this, which is auto-generated password. I have already copied that password and IP is 178.128.188.36. After the copy password, you need to run the command ssh space root @ and IP address of your droplet or cloud machine. Hit enter. It will ask you to provide your password, which you just copied from your email, paste it over here. Now hit enter. It is saying permission denied. So I will copy the password again and paste it over here. Maybe there was some kind of error in the copy paste and hit enter. See, I'm inside my machine. Now it is asking me to provide the current password. I will again copy the same password and press enter. It will ask you to provide new Unix password. Now you can provide any desired password to this machine. Press enter. Again confirm the password and press enter. So your password is being changed. Right now, if I will exit this machine and I want to access it again, then I can access it with the password which I just provided to this machine. Right? See, I'm inside the machine. If I will run the command show host, then it will display me the host name. Host name, sorry, not show host. The command should be host name. Then it will provide you the host name, which is Docker, right? We can see the same name is over here on our machine, which is Docker. My droplet name is Docker. So team, this is the way how can we create a machine on the cloud, right? I have provided a link in the next text lecture from which you can get a $10 credit code and you can use that credit code in your DigitalOcean account, right? For this, you need to go to the billing section on your DigitalOcean account and apply that particular code. This is all for the today. In next lecture, we will learn how we can install the Docker on the Linux machine. Thank you guys. I will see you in the next lecture. Please install the Edge release on your Linux machine, which means the latest Edge release will be installed on your machine. So there are quite a benefit of the Edge release as Docker, the latest functionality, the latest changes, you will consume all the latest functionality and all the latest changes ever, right? Edge is the release of the Docker which release monthly or sometimes quarterly, and which is the latest release of the Docker. The second way to install the Docker is you need to go to store.docker.com and you will find out the instruction for the each distro of the Linux. The installation of the Docker on the Linux VM, Linux cloud machine or Linux local machine, all the same processes, right? So there is no difference to install the Docker on Linux cloud machine and on Linux local machine and Linux VM machine. We have a same set of instruction, we have a same set of procedure to install the Docker on a Linux machine. So let's see how can we install a Docker on Linux machine. So we will see how can we install the Docker on Linux machine. So very first way is, and after that we will see add users to Docker user group. So first we will see the install the Docker on a Linux machine. To install the Docker on a Linux machine, I need to open the Linux cloud machine which we have created in the last lecture. So I have on my DigitalOcean account and Docker, this is the Linux machine we have created in the last lecture. So if you are using a Linux distro or Linux in your local operating system, then it's up to you. Either you can use your local operating system to install the Docker or you can create a cloud machine. If you are using a local operating system, then there is a lot of benefits, right? You don't need to pay anything to anyone, right? And you have the resource as per your need, right? But if you're creating a cloud machine, then you need to pay for that particular machine to the DigitalOcean or the cloud provider. Either it could be AWS, it could be a Google Cloud or DigitalOcean, right? And you have a limited resources. Although altogether we can vertically scale the resources on the cloud, that is another part and not in the scope of this particular course. So I'm going to install the Docker on the cloud machine because in my local machine, in my native machine, I'm running the Mac operating system. For this, I will copy this IP and open the terminal. Increase the font size so that you can get it better. I will access that machine from my terminal SSH, username, @ and IP. Enter the password. Now I'm inside my cloud machine, right? If I run host name, then you can say it is returning Docker, which is the host name of my machine, right? So very first we will see how can we install the Docker using the store.docker.com. So I will go to store.docker.com. Right now I'm on my store.docker.com and I have logged in with my account. To install the Docker, I will go to the Docker Community Edition as we are using Community Edition versions. And we know very well our machine is a Ubuntu based machine. So I will find out the distro which is available for the Ubuntu. So here is the Docker distro which is available for the Ubuntu, right? If you are using CentOS, you can choose this. If you're using Fedora, you can choose this, right? I'm using the Ubuntu, then I can choose this, right? And over here, I'm getting available for free to install on any server, VM or cloud with community support. By downloading this, you agree terms of the Docker software and users, right? Here is the complete description. How can we basically install the Docker on my machine, right? So these are the prerequisite. I need Xenial, Artful or Trustworthy 14.04. This is the minimum requirement for this particular distro. So here is the complete document which is available. So I will click this link. And over here we have the complete document to install the Docker on a Linux machine. So there are some prerequisites, right? You should know your operating system type, right? And the Docker C supports Ubuntu on 64-bit, right? If you already have the Docker on your machine, then you need to uninstall it. To check, you can execute the command Docker version. Press enter. So you are getting the program Docker is currently not installed. So it means Docker is not available on your machine, but you are getting a message. You can install it by typing apt install docker.io. You can install the Docker by this way as well, but it will install a very old release on your machine. For the latest release, we can follow the document which we have over here, right? So here is the processor to install Docker CE. And it is saying most users set up the Docker prerequisite, install using repository, right? So first, before you install the Docker CE, first time on a new host machine, you need to set up the Docker repository. Afterward, you can install the Docker, update Docker from the repository. So to set up the repository, we need to execute this command as they are mentioned. So I simply copy this command and paste it over here, press enter. So it is downloading something, and basically it is it will set up a repository for you on your machine. After this, install package to allow apt to use repository over HTTPS. For this, we simply execute this command. Press enter. So it will do, it works, and it is saying core certificates is already newest version, curl is already the newest version, software properties common is already the newest version. It basically done all the work. It's created the app package, or it's installed the app package for the repository, right? After that, we need to add Docker's official Gpz key, right? So we execute this particular command. So all commands are mentioned on the official Docker site. And it is saying OK. And after then, the last command is to verify that you have the key, right? We don't need to do this. If you want, you can execute this, but there is no need to do this, right? This is just optional. So it is returning the public key is this, UID is this, and subdirectory is this. I will clear my console. And after then, the fourth step is use the following command to set up the stable repository. You always need to stable repository even if you want to install builds from Edge or test repositories as well, right? So there are different commands for different kind of operating systems, right? We know very well we have the 64-bit operating system, but if you don't know your operating type system, then simply you can copy this command and execute on your machine, and it will return it's a Xenial based system, right? If you want to use what kind of operating system, it is 64-bit or something like that, you can execute lsb release -a. It is saying the complete distro information, no LSB module available, distro is Ubuntu, and description is Ubuntu 16.04.5, release is 16.4, and code name is Xenial. Now we know very well this is my operating system, so I will simply copy this command and execute on my machine. Press enter. After then you need to execute the command sudo apt get update. It will update all your packages. This will complete. After this, you will execute the command sudo apt get install CE. It will ask you to continue, press Y and press enter. So it will download the Docker on your machine and unpack the Docker CE version. So you can see the process is done. And after that, it is saying to install a specific version of CE, install the list available of the versions. So we don't need any specific version, right? So we will leave it. After this, if you will execute the command docker version, then you can see it is returning the client is 18.06.1 and server is 18.06.1, right? So basically Docker is installed on your machine and it is saying the version is 18.06.1 CE, which is community edition, right? So this is the way how can you install the Docker on your Linux machine. The commands will be same if you are using Linux in local machine, if you are using Linux on cloud as we are using, or if you are using any Linux virtual machine. So we have seen how we can install the Docker. Now we will see how can we add a user to Docker user group. So what does it mean? Why we are doing this? So basically let's see how we can add a root user in the Docker user group. After that we will discuss about the application of this particular use case. To add the user or your root user in your Docker group, you need to execute the command usermod -ag Docker and your username. So I want to add root as a user in my Docker user group. Press enter and it's done. Right? So what does it mean? Why we are adding a root user as a user in the Docker user group? So basically in this particular course, you need to update, you need to create and implement and execute a lot of things. Every time, if you are not added your root user as a Docker user, then every time you will execute some Docker command, you will face some kind of errors like you don't have the permission and like that. So to avoid these kind of situations, we need to use sudo, but with the sudo we need to provide the password as well, right? So to avoid these kind of stuff, to avoid the delay, we are basically using a root user as a Docker user. So for this, we will add our root user into the Docker user group, right? If you will execute the command docker version, it will simply execute, right? You don't need to provide any sudo command or something like that, right? That's all. Now, next thing is about the code editor. So if you are using Linux in your local machine, then you can execute or you can install the Visual Studio Code Editor, which is a very native and you can say which is very functionally rich code editor for the Docker, right? Because it has the Docker extension. So in the last lecture, we have seen how we can install the Visual Code Studio on a Mac machine. If you want to install the same on your Linux machine, then simply you need to go to the Visual Code Studio or simply download Visual Code Studio, press enter, and you will get the download link. You can use the Debian version or RMPM version, right? If you want any version, you can get it over here, right? So Visual Code Studio is available for the Windows, for Debian based systems, and for the Mac OS as well, right? So we will use the Visual Code Studio as a code editor in this particular course. So we have discussed all these things. We have seen how we can install the Docker. We have seen how we can add user to the Docker user group. We can see how which code editor we are going to use in this particular course, right? Now we will see how we can install Docker machine and Docker Compose, right? So to install the Docker machine and Docker Compose on your Linux machine, you need to visit docs.docker.com. So what are the Docker machine and what is the Docker Compose? We will have a complete sections on these particular topics which we are going to use in this particular course. So in these sections, we will learn all the application and uses of the Docker machine and Docker Compose. Right now, it's enough to know that Docker machine and Docker Compose are the tools of the Docker toolset, right? So to install the Docker machine and Docker Compose, we will visit docs.docker.com. Once you will be on the docs.docker.com, you will get a search over here, type Docker machine. And you will get a link install Docker machine. Simply click it. You will land over here. And over here, you will get a complete commands to install the Docker machine on your local machine, right? So we will go to the prerequisite install Docker. We have already completed that path. Now download the Docker machine binary and extract it to your path, right? For the Mac OS, for the Linux, we need to execute this command. So we simply copy this command right? And execute on our terminal. So clear the console and paste this command. Press enter. So it will take some time. Just wait until the complete download will done, and after that it will install the Docker machine on your machine. Once the process will done, you can execute the command docker-machine version, and it will return you the version of your Docker machine. So currently the Docker machine version 0.14.0 is installed on my machine, on my Linux machine, right? In the same way, we can install the Docker Compose. For that, I need to again search for Docker Compose, right? And we'll get the link install Docker Compose. Click it, and you will land on the page install Docker Compose, right? And over here, we are getting different options for Mac, for Windows, and for Linux. We will go to the Linux, and we will learn on Linux you can download the Docker Compose binary from this. Follow instruction from the link which involve running curl command. By simply this command you can basically install the Docker Compose on your machine. It is saying use the latest Compose release number in the download command. If you have problems installing the curl, alternative install options are over here. Apply executable permission to the binary, right? So first we will copy this command and execute it. So clear the console and execute that command. So it will take few seconds to install the Docker Compose on your machine. Once done, you need to provide the executable permission to the Docker Compose binary. For this, you need to execute this command. So I will copy it and paste it on my terminal. Once done, you can execute the command docker compose version, and it will return you the version of Docker Compose installed on your machine, which is currently 1.22.0 is installed on machine. So this is the way how can we install the Docker on a Linux machine, how we can install the Docker machine on a Linux machine, and how we can install the Docker Compose on a Linux machine. So this is the complete tool set which is installed on my Linux machine. With the Windows and with the Mac, this is not required. When we are installing the Docker on a Mac or Windows, the complete tool set will be come with the Docker installation package, right? But if you're using the Linux, you need to install the Docker Compose and Docker machine separately on your machine. So all the commands we used in this particular lecture, all the links we used in this particular lecture, I will attach all the links in the next lecture as a text so you can get it easily. If you are missing something in this particular lecture, you can let us know and we will improve it. So thank you guys. Thanks for your time.